Good day, everyone. We were now discussing Asian Regionalism, provided by Group 1. So now let's move to its definition. Firstly, regionalism, the construction and utilization of multilateral intergovernmental institutions to share information. What we mean by multilateral intergovernmental is that regionalism is composed of two nations or parties, different parties. Example is that here in Philippines, if there is a national government, there is also local government. So in regionalism, if there is international regionalism, there is also local regionalism. So regionalism also to develop, endorse, and enforce common rules and regulation, and to settle disputes. So nagpapatupad din sila ng mga rules and regulation to settle disputes. So now let's move to the broadened introduction of Asian regionalism. Asian regionalism is the product of economic interaction, not political planning, as a result of successful, outward-oriented growth strategies. Asian economies had grown not only richer but also closer together. So, Asian regionalism is not any organization, it's not made of any organization agenda, not what we means of not political plannings. It's merely the product of economic interaction. What we means of economic interactions. Example, if there are storm, we cannot say that it's man-made. It's only natural to have storm. It's seasonal. So Asian regionalism is that a natural economic interaction. As a result of successful outward-oriented growth strategies, Asian economies had grown not only richer but also closer together. Let's say that machineries. Example is machineries. What we got on machineries is that it helps us to live our everyday life and is comfortable. And also technologies. What we brought us together closer. Online internet. Through online internet, we can communicate. We can interact. And that is the broadened introduction of Asian regionalism. Now let's move to its evolution.
Now, for the next is the evolution of Asian regionalism. The evolution of Asian regionalism started where the ASEAN is created, or the Association of Southeast Asian Nation. Sinasabi na ang ASEAN is the idea of SEATO, or the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, and type of na Asian NATO, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, dahil ang kanilang primary goal is against communism. Now, for the first timeline of ASEAN have is 1967, or to be exact of August 8, 1967 is where the ASEAN is created by 5 members only. Original members only, the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, and Thailand. Now, the declaration happened in Bangkok, Thailand, and their primary goal is to consolidate the Southeast Asia against communism. Now, for the next timeline is 1989, where the first ministerial meeting on APEC was happened. And this meeting was held in Canberra, Australia, by the minister of 5 ASEAN members, regional members, and Japan, Korea, Brunei, New Zealand, Canada, Australia, and US. The the ministerial meeting was held by 2 days, or to be exact, of November 6 to 7, 1989. The meeting discussed the global trade, economic development, and the future step of APEC. Now, for the next timeline is same year of 1989, where the APEC is supported by the USA, or the United States of America. Former US President Bill Clinton established to practice the annual meeting of APEC to discuss the great strategic vision and cooperation of APEC.
In year 1997, the ASEAN plus the three major economic engines, which are the Japan, Korea, and China, was instituted. Kapag sinabi nating economic engines, ito yung sistema na sumusuporta sa financial infrastructure ng isang ahensya, which is yung ASEAN. In year 2000, dito lumaganap ang globalization na nakarating sa East and Southeast Asia, maging sa iba pang mga bansa. Dahil dito, nagkaroon ng kompetisyon ang bansang Japan at China para makasabay sa lumalaganap na globalisasyon sa pamamagitan ng politics of membership para makabuo ng ASEAN Plus 6. So, bukod sa tatlong bansa na Japan, Korea at China, madadagdagan sila ng India, Australia, and New Zealand na ngayon ay tinatawag na East Asian Summit. So, in the year 2006, sinimulan ng Trans-Pacific Partnership o TPP ang pagkakaroon ng agreement among small Asia-Pacific countries tulad ng Singapore. Nakatulong ang TPP sa pagbawas ng taxes sa iba't ibang bansa na gumagamit ng Made in America products para magkaroon ng benepisyo sa America's middle class. So, by the year 2010, the TPP grew large and ambitious framework to liberalize economic transactions in the Asia-Pacific through adding new members including the United States, Australia, and some other countries. So, ang mas lumaki at naging mas madali yung economic transaction ng TPP by the year of 2010. At dito na rin na dagdag ang United States at Australia at iba pang mga bansa. The year 2010 was also marked vigorous and deep advances into the region by two giants, the China and the United States. So, it is clear that by 2010, the stage was set for the new evolution of Asian regionalism.
So we go on to the characteristics of Asian regionalism. First characteristic is the absence of hegemonic regionalism. Due to equipability legitimacy gap, ASEAN centrality as the basis for wider regionalism. So when we say hegemonic, merong isang ruling or dominante na in a political or social context na bansa. So dito sa Asia, hindi natin masasabi absence. So walang ganun, walang isang bansa na nagro-rule or nagdo-dominate sa isa pa. So yun yung unang characteristic. Pangalawa, avoidance of collective defense and preference for cooperative security. So when we say collective defense, an attack against one ally is considered an attack against all allies. So, avoidance yung sa Asia, ASEAN, ang mga bansa is hindi ganun. So, para kung inatake yung isang bansa, hindi susuporta or hindi tutulong yung isang bansa na yun ng basta-basta, and so avoidance for preference for cooperative security. So, yung isang bansa ay may sarili security para din katulad ng sa bansa at wala silang pakialaman sa ganun. Next is open regionalism rather than EU-style integration. So, open regionalism involves regional economic integration without discrimination against economies outside the region. So, parang yung economy ng isang bansa is nire-respect or walang discrimination against ibang economies outside the outside dun sa bansang yun. So, pantay din yung tingin sa bawat economies. While, pag sinabi kasi yung EU-style integration tulad ng nakaraang lessons, for example sa currency, yung currency ng isang bansa is parehas din sa ibang bansa, which is maganda rin namang magandang characteristics ng EU-style integration. Pero dito kasi sa Asian regionalism, open regionalism lang ang meron tayo. So, meron tayong peso sa ibang bansa, other currency din. So, we respect that. Next is soft institutionalism. So, when we say soft institutionalism, it may lead to strengthening of collaboration without renegotiating existing commitments, while also avoiding unnecessary institutional burdens. Soft regionalism is based on informality, pragmatism, non-confrontational bargaining, and consensus building. So, sa ASEAN, which is a soft institutionalism, yung mga bansa is may cooperation, but wala silang commitments talaga in terms of papers na parang ito na pagkasunduan ng isang bansa sa ASEAN sa isa pa bansa. Walang ganun. Parang nagsama-sama lang sila, isa lang silang grupo, pero wala silang commitment sa isa't isa. So, yun ang mga characteristics ng Asian regionalism.
Good day everyone, my name is Ermeline Aventurado and I'll be discussing the limitations in ASEAN regionalism. But first, why there is an ASEAN regionalism? While ASEAN regionalism is primarily motivated by the desire to advance welfare in the region, it would not do so by distracting from development elsewhere. On the contrary, ASEAN regionalism can help us to sustain global economic progress at a time when their other major regions are reaching economic maturity. So let's proceed to the limitations. The first one is the problem of regional definition and no clear definitions of the region. By that, regionalization can be defined as political, administrative process by which region emerge as relevant unit of analysis for economic and political activity and also welfare and service provision. In many cases, this notion of regionalization can be equated to notions of regionalizations from above, or devolutions, and in other regions being the objects of governmental reforms. So for the second limitation, addiction to sovereignty, non-interventions, and the ASEAN way. ASEAN was to succeed in these aims beyond all expectations. Southeast Asia has not seen open conflict between ASEAN members. Immediately after the end of the wars in the Indochina in 1975, ASEAN members reached out to the reunited Vietnam and to Laos, leaving over the wall erected by the ideology and history. Vietnam's intervention in Cambodia in 1978, however, placed it and ASEAN on opposite sides of the political and diplomatic fence for another decade. So for the third limitation, the expansion of membership and functions. So by that, the small and medium-sized states in Southeast Asia have faced significant geostrategic changes in the end of the Cold War and the rise of China. Over the last decade, scholars have been debated how these countries would cope with growing Chinese power and how the relations with the other major powers in the region would change. Some analysts have suggested that the region is shifting toward a more China-centered order, but this view is premature. Issuing the simple dichotomy of balancing versus bandwagoning, Southeast Asian countries do not want to choose between two major powers, the United States and China. This avoidance strategy is not merely tactical and time buying. By that, instead, Southeast Asian states have actively tried to influence the shape of the new regional order. Key Southeast Asian states are pursuing two main pathways to order in the region: no omni-immension or major powers and complex balance of influence. They have helped to produce an interim power distribution outcome, which is the hierarchical regional order that retains the United States dominant in the superpower position while incorporating China in a regional great power position just below that of the said United States. So for the fourth limitation, the presence of great powers in the region. ASEAN, or the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, the premier regional association in East Asia, this year celebrates its 30th anniversary. ASEAN has sought to enhance the regional security and economic development in Southeast Asia by pursuing cooperative activities and maintaining active dialogues with the major powers and other Asia-Pacific countries, including Australia and others. Since the end of the Cold War, ASEAN has moved to boost its activity and to enlarge its membership with the aim of including all 10 Southeast Asian countries. So, for the fifth, which is the uncertain and indecisive leadership of ASEAN and Asian regional bodies. By that, globalization creates greater opportunity for firms in less industrialized countries to tap into more and largest markets around the world. Thus, the business located in developing countries have more access to capital plus, technology, human capital, cheaper imports, and large export markets. That's all. Thank you.
Next is the contribution of Asian regionalism. First is constructing a security community in Southeast Asia to build on what has been constructed over the years in the field of political and security cooperation. The ASEAN leaders have agreed to establish the ASEAN Political Security Community, or APSC. The APSC shall aim to ensure that countries in the region live at peace with one another and with the world in a just, democratic, and harmonious environment. Next is to enhance the collective voice and bargaining capacity of Asian actors, small, medium, or large. Every worker with a sensible manager can express their own views as an individual. Also, ASEAN has increased trade tension between ASEAN important trade partners, meaning that almost every trade that are made by ASEAN has a very high chance of ending well. Next is developing an active epistemic community in regional, economic, and security affairs, meaning ASEAN develops network of knowledge-based experts who help decision makers to define the problems they face, identify various policy solutions, and assess the policy outcomes in the production, distribution, security, and consumption of goods and services. Next, development stability nexus. This is connected in the security community because this is where the governments can focus on their own development because no conflict between religions will happen. Next is resolving Cambodia conflict and focusing international concern about the South China Sea dispute. ASEAN first played a role in Cambodia when Vietnam invaded the country in 1978, after which ASEAN member states pushed the UN to cease its recognition of the Vietnamese installed People's Republic of Kampuchea or PRK government. The PRK for its part argued that it deserved to represent Cambodia at the UN because it had won the civil war with Pol Pot's Democratic Kampuchea. For its ASEAN neighbors, however, Vietnam's control over the PRK was unacceptable and amounted to a case of foreign intervention, something to which ASEAN has a particular aversion. While Vietnam hardened its stance and maintained control of Cambodia during this time, ASEAN was successful to some extent in preventing the PRK from representing Cambodia at the UN. For decades, overlapping territorial claims to the South China Sea have had destabilizing effect in East and Southeast Asia, with broader implications beyond the region. For ASEAN countries, Brunei, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Vietnam are direct claimants in the South China Sea conflict. ASEAN's role as a regional resolution of these claims and maintaining stability is challenging because the conflict presents potentially divisive rifts among ASEAN members themselves. This paper explores ASEAN's role in managing the South China Sea conflict by examining the actions of two non-claimant states that functioned as country coordinators for ASEAN-China relations from 2012 to 2018. Thailand and Singapore, the efforts of these two countries as honest brokers shed light on how ASEAN can deal with this ongoing crisis so as to ensure the organization's ongoing effectiveness and sustain regional harmony. The concept of normative power is employed to explain the potential role of non-claimant states in conflict transformation. Next is socialization of China and the other newcomers. This means that the relation of China to others like Vietnam, India, and the US. Next is promoting inclusiveness and cooperative security. China, US, Japan, India, Russia, Europe work jointly through agreed mechanisms to reduce tensions and suspicion, resolve or mitigate disputes, build confidence, enhance economic development prospects, and maintain stability in their regions. So the question is, what if there is no regional institution in Asia? There will be no accelerating economic growth, social progress, and social cultural evolution among its members, no protection of regional stability.
Prospects and reforms in Asian regionalism. After the 1997-1998 financial crisis, there has been an increasingly support from the private sector's initiative and the institutional agreements towards the market-driven integration process in East Asia. This is for it to enhance the regionalism in trade and investment, money and finance and infrastructures, and associated softwares. In the next bullet, various studies suggest that trade and finance has been going hand in hand and has been increasing within East Asia region. In the increased trade and financial integrations in East Asia, along with the monetary policy coordination, created a greater synchronization between business cycles in selected countries that is mainly due to the greater or the growing importance of the intra-industry trade. In the following bullet, in doing so, it appears that it is feasible to establish a currency union in East Asia countries, particularly in Indonesia, Japan, Korea, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand. This is taking into consideration both ex ante and ex post data. In doing so, in the following bullet, consider there could be a trade track and money finance track. The trade track could widen the web of multiple or multiplicating free trade agreements into a much more seamless FTA agreements for the entire ASEAN plus 3 country regions, and eventually will be including India to it. On the money and finance track, the next agenda of this is to fully multilateralize the use of CMI or the Chiang Mai Initiative. In doing so, it can create an AMO or the Asian Monetary Corporation Fund in the course of 3 to 5 years. Since the establishment of this can create a centralized reserve pool of money for the region of East Asia. This will create a more financial or can create a financial stability within the following country. In the next bullet, there are 2 approaches in doing so, the European and the parallel currency. The parallel currency pertains to the bottom up, and this is much more market oriented and alternatively rigged than the top-bottom approach or the European approach. When we say parallel currency, it is having a currency, another currency or a second currency alongside with the national currency. And when we say the European approach, it is a strong political commitment between countries to have a single currency that is used within that union. In some sense, the parallel currency approach continues in East Asia's current market-oriented integration.